I grew up in an Arab home, and professions like lawyer, doctor, engineer, like they were regarded with quite a bit of some esteem, right? And my dad used to always kind of mention the profession of like being a lawyer to me. But it was never a pressure. It was never a pressure like you need to be a lawyer. But it just so happened that I was very much interested in it myself. And anytime I would do something in relation to law, I absolutely loved it. When I was doing one of my interviews, the lady that was interviewing me, the partner, she told me that she had worked in the Middle East. So instantly there, because I was actually listening to her, like not completely stressing out, I made a note of that because that's something that I could speak to her about because I was interested in it as well. So listening to your interviewer and being genuinely interested in their journey too, I think is very important. To be very vulnerable on this podcast, I had an interview on the day that my dad passed away. So it was very, very crazy, as you can imagine. And I think it was a very pivotal moment for me, right? In a positive sense, because it made me kind of reevaluate everything.
Welcome to the Valuable Podcast, where there is value in every conversation. I'm your host, Victor Sasanya, and today I am joined with Alaa Fawaz, TEDx speaker and law student with a training contract offer from a Magic Circle law firm. In this episode, we learn how Alaa turned her pain into purpose and how she's a voice for the youth in politics and social mobility. But yeah, welcome Alaa. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me, Victor. So I am Alaa Fawaz. I'm currently a third year law student at Warwick University. So it's my last year now. I'm also a future trainee at Clifford Chance. And a little bit about me, I'm a big advocate for social mobility. Community plays a large role in how I grew up, and it's something that is very valuable to me.
That's good. And you grew up in Slough, if I'm correct?
In Slough, so just outside of London. Slough.
And what was that like growing up in Slough? Like,
I think it was amazing. I feel like I had a great experience growing up just because of the support that I had there. Like I really felt like it was a community, and as I'll probably speak about it in a little while, like youth services, youth clubs, the people there, whether it's like youth workers or just other young people living in that area, they've played such a large role in my life and how I've grown up and basically where I'm at right now. So I really owe it all back to Slough.
Really? So were you born there? Or?
Yes, so I was born there. So my family moved to Slough literally just before I was born. So they were based in West Africa at the time, and then they came here. I think it was like 2000. And then I was literally grew up there, lived in the same street for however many years.
Yeah.
And it's like a very multicultural place. It's like home. I really got used to it. And it's very interesting growing up because I went to a grammar school, and there was quite a few grammar schools in the area, but the people that you meet at a grammar school is like such a wide variety of people coming from all different types of areas and backgrounds. So that was something that was really interesting and played a little bit of a interesting role in my journey as well.
Yeah, and so was the grammar school, was that for like secondary or sixth form? Because I know that my mom really wanted me to go to grammar school, but unfortunately it didn't work out. But so
so it was, I went there for secondary school and for sixth form. So like you have to do like this 11 plus thing, and it was such a big thing back then. I think it is even now as well. And it was a thing where like tuition was such a big thing on 11 plus. Like every student would get tuition. That wasn't really the case with me. Like my mum, like God bless my mum, like she learned the whole kind of specification and things and basically just taught it to us. So I'm very fortunate to have had that. Otherwise, it probably would have been quite unlikely that I got into grammar school. Then I continued on in sixth form.
Yeah, and so is like grammar school where you sort of, because you talked about Slough, it's your home, you love it, community, lots of like youth clubs, etc. So it sounds like you're really in touch with like your community. Was like your school as well? Is that what fostered you? Would you say?
I would say, yes, school did play a role, but with my school in particular, there was a lot of people that came in from West London. So it wasn't all people from Slough because it was a grammar school. So a lot of people from London would come in to Slough to study there. So that's what I kind of meant, where you'd meet such a wide range of people. Like you can
Mm,
meet middle class people, working class people, people from like different backgrounds, and we were all kind of like put into one kind of school. So like trying to like navigate through that, where let's say you might have one friend that literally lives down the street, but then another friend that's has like comes from a really wealthy family. It was like such an interesting thing,
yeah.
um, trying to just see that. So
Yeah, and when you were young, you sort of rose up to different leadership positions, and you joined sort of like youth parliament. And so, what was that like, or should I say, like, how did you even get into that?
So I think it was 2015, and I was elected through my school to represent my school. So how it worked is that in the Slough Youth Parliament, there's representatives from each of the schools in the area, and then they came together to work on different campaigns, voice issues of young people, and kind of speak to local decision makers. So whether that be the MP or people that work around the MP. For example, like a big campaign that we were working on at the time was like a curriculum for life. So that meant trying to implement adequate PSHE and citizenship in schools across Slough, because some schools didn't really have great citizenship, others had like really great citizenship. So, like for example, like one of the things that we did is we created like a network of teachers to come together and then come and share resources. Um, and I think through the youth parliament, the Slough Youth Parliament, sorry, I then got elected to represent Slough as a whole. So it wasn't just my school, but then I went to kind of be the rep for Slough for like 11,000 young people in the UK Youth Parliament.
Wow,
So
that's a
there's,
big promotion.
yeah, no, it was crazy, but it was absolutely amazing. Like it was best period of my life. And some of the people that I met like at the age of 13, 14, I'm still in contact with them.
Yeah,
And with the UK Youth Parliament, we travel to like different areas in the country each year, and we go to different residentials. And what we'd do is we'd all come together, literally every corner of the country. Like you'd find people from Scotland, I don't know, Liverpool, from Southampton, and we'd come strategize, do some debating, think about what sort of campaigns we want to work on and how we're going to go about these campaigns in our respective areas.
yeah,
So like I went to York, I went to Liverpool at some point, so many different places, meeting people that are completely, not completely different, but come from different backgrounds, different villages, and like the lives that they just like led were very different, but we all came for, a common, I guess,
common cause.
goal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you know what's so crazy? Because I'm like, we've not even got to what you're doing now, but I'm already seeing like the questions I'm about to ask. I'm already seeing the trend because you're 13 and 14. Like, what was I doing when I was 13 and 14? In school, I was not thinking about bettering. Actually, I mean, I was thinking about bettering my community per se. But that was not how you were doing it. Not in a formal structure, like sitting on board youth parliament. Like, I don't even know if that was a thing. Maybe that's because I wasn't engaged that much in school, but I cannot remember any. Like, I live in Dagenham, so I grew up in Dagenham, Borough, Barking, and
You
Dagenham.
sure we had a rep from Barking?
Is there a rep there?
Yeah,
Oh no. Then it goes to show. See, I was not involved in the community. Not like that. Not formally. Probably informally. Like just with growing up. I don't know, with your boys. Maybe we used to complain about different things in our community. But at 14, who's thinking that we can change anything? Really? Like we're just trying to. We're learning. Like we just come out of primary school. So it's crazy how at that young age you had reps from different boroughs. You were basically with future leaders. Like you were with younger leaders who
yeah,
saw
definitely future.
things way before we ever did, and you are trying to actually implement strategies to change things. Because I think as young people, when you really think about it, we like, well, what I used to think is that we can't. Who am I to change a system that's been here for many years before me? I'm still in the school. Like I'm still 14, 15, and you're out there sort of already this element of networking from young people. I didn't hear about this term until I was in sixth form, but you're already doing it. So it's crazy. And do you think that's where you sort of built some sort of confidence or your communication skills?
I think the key thing is what you mentioned was network. I think that was one of the most valuable things. But also, just to what you were saying before, like, it was a lot of fun. It wasn't all serious. It was a lot of fun. Like, I remember when they came to my school. Like I said, it was just a way of contributing to the community. It didn't seem as serious. Obviously, when you're discussing serious issues, there is an element of, you have to be serious, like you're working on things. But at the same time, it was a lot. It was a lot more than just issues. You were literally bringing people, young people, together, and I think that in itself was very, very powerful. And just building a nationwide network of young people that all are trying to bring about change in different ways in their own areas. I think that's the most powerful thing about the UK Youth Parliament, is that itself, connecting people from these different places.
Wow. And sort of like when you connected with these different people, like you said, you moved up from Slough. I mean, you were just taking promotions, should I say? But did they teach you about politics? It sounds like a silly question, but like again, I don't hear, like, in fact, let's even break it down, because I don't want to assume everybody even knows what politics is. What is politics, or what's a youth parliament, and why do they even exist?
Okay, this is great. So with the Youth Parliament and the UK Youth Parliament, they are apolitical organisations. So they're basically youth organisations, right? But they do not campaign for a specific party. You are not, when you're representative, you are not meant to, I guess, like, actively affiliate yourself with a political party. You are apolitical. You're there to represent young people. So in the Youth Parliament, the UK Youth Parliament, you had people with different political ideologies. That's also pretty important as well.
Could you just explain what that means?
So just have different views on different issues. So, not everyone's going to agree on the same things. And they had different beliefs as well. And they might be, leaning to certain parties that were maybe different to the party that I'm leaning to. So you had difference in political beliefs. Yeah, and so it did teach me about politics in terms of obstacles, like what are the certain obstacles that people face when you're trying to, let's say, campaign for an issue, or you're trying to bring about change. There's a lot of political things that you have to take into consideration. Like, for example, if we wanted to campaign for something like votes at 16, so 16, 17-year-olds have the votes, we kind of had to be a little bit kind of tactical and think, okay, well, what is the biggest obstacle? Will the government currently in power, will they support something like this? So what is the likelihood of something like this being achieved? So you had to take things like that into consideration. But they did not specifically teach you about, like, certain parties and their beliefs. You did engage with, both of the main parties. It just depended on, I guess, your constituency, so the area that you lived in, and who your MP was. So, for example, you might be supporting a specific party, but your MP that you're trying to work with as a youth campaigner, they might be of a different party. Like, so they might have different beliefs, but you still have to engage with them. You still have to work with them in that community. In your community.
That's quite interesting, actually. So, for yourself, like, what was that like? Did you ever have any sort of conflict with trying to push for a certain campaign, working with people with different beliefs? Because I think this is not just beneficial in terms of being in youth parliament, but in life. Like, if you enter the workforce, you might not believe something your colleague is believing, or you might have different views, but you're part of one team trying to push towards the end goal. So I think this will be really, valuable for people to hear sort of how do you deal with that sort of conflicting views.
I think at the time it wasn't such a problem. I still have an amazing MP, Tandesi. He was so supportive of everything that we were doing in the community. So I didn't really have a problem with trying to get our MP at the time on our side to kind of listen to what we had to say. But I think this conflict in beliefs, I think, was more noticeable once I had left. because at the time when you're at that stage, you're still learning about, what different parties believe, like where do you stand. Like I'm still at the stage where, you still feel a little bit lost in this whole like political system, and you don't know really where you belong. But I think now I'm starting to see the conflicts a little bit more, just being simply at university as well, speaking to people on a personal basis. And I think a lot of the time, even back then, when there was a conflict in like beliefs, it wasn't always with the people that were other youth campaigners, but it was more so people that were, let's say, around me. So other young people, let's say in my community. So if I was to propose to people, like some of my peers, vote 16 and 17-year-olds should have the right to vote. Some of them will just look at me like, no, I don't think we should. So I think there was more disagreement, people around, people around me. Because at the same time, you're not just convincing politicians, you're not just convincing local decision makers or people in business or so on. You also have to convince young people around you. And that was one thing I guess people kind of dismiss a little bit, because you're not just trying to influence those at the top. It's also other young people who might not think, okay, youth parliament, they're not going to really do anything. Number two, why should I really even vote, or why should I be a part of this process, or, that this whole thing is just pointless. You have to convince other young people too. That's so important.
Yeah.
That's probably harder, because how can you have like a united front and influence those that are in charge when your peers, are just not with it? So
yeah, and I think that's good. So like, because so do you think then that young people should be more engaged with politics? Because I think a lot of people, I won't speak for everybody, but myself, I'll just use myself as an example, is that I'm 21 now, right? And I wasn't engaged with politics up until, and I'm not super engaged with politics, to just tell you the honest truth. But I'm still aware up until like when I was 19, 20, when we had to vote, right? That's when I started. So do you think that it's necessary for like 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds to get engaged with politics at such a young age?
this is something that I actually spoke quite a bit about during my TED talk. And I kind of just navigate my journey through being youth campaigner, being really involved in politics and all the, different changes that were happening in, like the government, knowing the ins and outs, to being at a stage now where I feel like that's definitely not what politics is all about. Okay. You don't have to know who, just resigned, or internal party, I don't know, troubles or conflicts to know about politics. And that's the main thing that I really started to realize very recently, that politics is very personal. You, like I said, you might not know about certain parties or who even belongs in those in those parties, but what it is about the things that you care about. It's about your own experiences. And a lot of people don't have to learn about politics because it's their lived reality, it's their lived experiences. That is politics. And it's kind of a thing where you have to engage, or let politics kind of, determine your chances, determine how you lead your life. So I think it's very much personal. So to say that it's just reduced to parties or what you see on BBC News is very reductive of what politics is. It's a lot more than that. It's very personal. It's about, it's about the things that you believe. It's about, how you treat other people. Like, that's politics. Okay, how you communicate with others. What sort of attitudes do you have towards certain people? It's all rooted in something political, right? Your own family situation or your household issues that you might be facing, whether you're a working class family, whether you're on benefits, or all these different things, a certain school that you went to, that is all politics. So I think a lot of people don't realize how much they are already engaged in politics. But I think the one thing that needs to happen now is that they need to be, young people should be more empowered to drive what happens in their lives and realize how everything is rooted, I guess, in politics. But it's a lot more than just parties. It's literally your life.
No, I agree, and congratulations for the TEDx talk. I was about to mention it, and you said something. You said that politics is over intellectualized. What did you mean by that?
I think when you think of politics, the first thing you think about is like things that are happening on the news, things that are so complex, different processes, or like thinking about everything very critically and thinking, I don't know, using philosophers and thinkers and all these things, especially when you're at uni. Like politics is it's a study, but it's more than that, right? It's your life. It's a lot more simple. It's a lot closer to home than people think. It's not something that just people study or write essays about. It's lived experiences at the same time. So people that might not know, like I just said, all these processes or all these, what certain ideologies are, what liberalism means, or what all of this means, right? They don't. A lot of people, some people don't need to know what that means because they are living everything that people are studying. If that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
not to say that things like theory and the study of politics is not important. It is, but I think by intellectualizing politics, it starts to exclude people, and people start to feel like they're not a part of the conversation. So that's what I kind of meant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see through your journey sort of engaging with politics and doing that TEDx talk, like you're really a great speaker. And I I admire because I do a bit of speaking myself, so I can definitely tell when someone is really passionate about something, or you're bold and you get across your points like with clarity. And I just wanted to touch on sort of that speaker element. Like how was the TEDx talk? How did you feel when you got up on stage?
I think it was amazing. Like I hadn't spoken in public in a long time, ever since COVID. So it was I was nervous. Like I've spoken so many times in front of people, but I was still nervous. It was very exciting. It was very empowering. But at the same time, to be honest with you, like at the time I had loads of assignments, so I was very stressed. So I guess the talk just gave me something a little bit to be excited about.
Yeah, and do you plan it? Like, did you plan what you're going to say word for word? Did you have notes? Did you just go out there and just speak?
So so how it started is I applied to do the TEDx talk on the same topic last year. But because I had so many assignments, I said to them that I can't come to the interview, like, sorry. But then this year I was like, I have to do it. Regardless if I'm flooded with work, I just have to do it. So then, you had interview application, all that stuff. And yeah, so you can plan it. Some people go up there and just kind of give it all they've got. But because it's pretty long, I definitely did plan it. I did have notes, so I could see like my notes. But at the same time, yeah, I think once the information, the content that you're saying is so close to home, like
Mm.
it's a little bit easier because you're talking about yourself. So it's kind of, you don't have to memorize. If you know yourself well and you know your experiences and the things that you're passionate about, like it was a little bit easier for me in that sense. I wasn't like talking about loads of case studies and all these facts that you need to know. It was just, I guess, my story.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. And where can we watch it? Watch it back? Is it possible to watch it back?
So not at the moment. So like it takes a long process for them to kind of like edit, and then they have to kind of send it off to TEDx. They need to approve it. So it is a little bit of a long process. But when it is, you'll definitely have access to it.
No, perfect. We'll make sure. I might personally just write up a new email, making sure all the subscribers have access to that video, because I think it's definitely would be worth a watch. But you talked about assignments a lot. So you're about to finish university studying law. Where did this come from in terms of like your journey into law?
So my earliest memory of wanting to do law was actually in primary school. Funnily enough, I remember always saying in primary school that I either wanted to become a scientist or a judge, and I didn't really know what each of them exactly was. I knew one was to do with science and the other one was to do with law, and that
Yeah.
was probably just about it. Um, I grew up in an Arab home, and professions like lawyer, doctor, engineer, like they were regarded with quite a bit of some esteem, right? And my dad used to always kind of mention the profession of like being a lawyer to me. But it was never a pressure. It was never a pressure like you need to be a lawyer. But it just so happened that I was very much interested in it myself. And anytime I would do something in relation to law, I absolutely loved it. So no one that I knew in my family had done law or were working in any corporate jobs. Like I still struggle to try and explain to like my mum like what it means to work in commercial law. So yeah, so like my parents had like working class jobs. But I was interested in things like debating since primary school. I used to take part in mock trial competitions. So it's basically where you pretend to be like a barrister and you'd go and argue in a court against like other schools. Um, I would I went to like some summer schools in year 10, and they went and just taught you things about law. So as if you were doing like a law module, and I went and did that in summer. I was able to get like a bursary to do that, and everything I was doing, so every step of the way, it just made sense. I completely loved it. So the next step of undertaking a law degree, like I felt like that was a natural step for me. Like I loved history, I loved politics and philosophy, and law just encompassed all of that as a degree. Yeah, like I was such an eager child. So before I had even done my GCSEs, like I would spend a ridiculous amount of time after school just researching unis and law degrees. Like I'd been planning for a long time before I even got to the stage of applying at UCAS. Like I knew which
Oh,
five unis I wanted to apply to since like year 10. Like I was very much eager in that sense, and I had been working towards it like from a pretty early stage.
yeah. And so where did that eagerness come from so young? Because I'm sure it doesn't just, you don't just wake up and say, I'm going to be a judge, I'm going to be a barrister or a lawyer. I mean, I don't think it works like that. But so where do you think that sort of stemmed from? Is it linked to the youth parliament stuff? Is it linked to making change in your community?
I think it's definitely community aspect, but I would also say personal. It's quite personal as well. I think a large part of my academic journey, it was a bit of an escape, I would say. A lot of things during that time in secondary school, a lot of things were happening in my life, and things I couldn't really control. So like personal things, I say to do with family. But I used to always say like, there's some things I can control. And I used to always see, it sounds so cringy, but like I used to think, hey, I can control my academics, I can control my career. So let me just focus on that and put a lot of effort into it. And that's like really, that's what I did. It was, a way for me to look forward for something that can like completely transform my life and my family's life. So when I like say I'm an eager child and I used to spend my time researching all these like work experience or unis and stuff, like it's not just like an ideal pathway that everyone needs to go through to become a lawyer straight away. But my passion, it came out of hardship. I would honestly say it came out of hardship. Living in a low income household, experiencing the things that were happening in my life, and I just needed something like some sort of purpose, honestly, that
No.
to get me kind of through that, something to look forward to that could change my life. And that's where I was like, okay, I need to focus on at school. I need to, get my grades. I need to go to a good uni. I need to get a good job. So I feel like that's where the passion and the focus and the drive came from. Like I knew, the hardships that my family were facing, and I knew where I wanted them to be and where I wanted to be and what I wanted my life to look like. So that's really where it began. It was honestly the passion and the focus came from hardship. It's not all like glitz and glamour. It's not that I just woke up and I'm such an eager person that wanted to do everything right. Like it was not that at all.
Not at all. It sounds like to me like the pain breeded purpose. And you said something that was so key. You said that you can't, because you're so right. There's so many things in this world we can't control, but you were like, I can control my career. And that is so true. I feel like many similarities between me and yourself. Like from a young age, I knew that there are some things I can't control, but I can control my career. I can control my outcome. I can control where I'm going to go in life. And you know the famous saying, you're a product of your environment. How much do I agree with that statement? I think I agree with it, but people assume that you can't change your environment. Does that make sense? So like, oh, she's like this, he's like this. Why? Because they're a product of their environment. If they grew up in a low income household or a bad community, that's what, like, we shouldn't expect much more. But it's sort of like that's based on the assumption or the premise that you can't change your environment. And I think you can, and you can do that mentally, internally, in terms of your vision, in terms of how you perceive the world, your goals, your self development, and you can do that externally to an extent. I mean, I'm not saying to run out, leave home, and go homeless like in the middle of the city, but I feel like you can change your friends, you can change people who you choose to hang around with, and the fact that that eagerness or that drive to want better for yourself came from that sort of hardship. And it's lovely. Like not the hard bit, of course, but the fact that the purpose is breeded out of the pain, and we're seeing so many things you're doing now. And it's not just like you're at university studying law. It's the fact that this is a valuable podcast, and you're very valued in what you do. Like, so you've done a couple of internships at some major law firms. Like, we won't mention them, but I'm sure people know, like, some major law firms. And you received training contracts to come back. So can you talk to me a bit about how did you actually go about applying for these law firms, or being picked, doing the internship, and then getting rewarded a training contract?
It began in, I would say, like sixth form. So, like I said, I would always be researching things. My school never really kind of introduced me to corporate law or anything like that. I was interested in law generally, but I was just exploring loads of different things. So I explored things like immigration law, like refugee and asylum law, so many different things, criminal law. And then I stumbled upon a work experience at a Magic Circle law firm, which was, the purpose of it was to get underrepresented groups and introduce them to commercial law. So I stumbled upon it, and I just kind of went through the whole application process. And this was in year 13. So in year 13, that was when I had my first exposure to commercial law with the firm that I now currently have a training contract at. So I had met them quite at a young age, when I didn't know like what it was like to work, in Canary Wharf, going there with the big, skyscrapers, feeling like such a little girl. Like I remember rocking up one time like in Vans, like I just didn't like, I don't know what
Really?
I don't know what I was entering.
Can I ask a quick question? Wait, so is it like Suits?
It felt like it for sure. Like when I was getting on the tube early in the morning, everyone's walking with purpose. Like I was walking with purpose too. Like I had somewhere to be. Like it was great. So so that's where I started in sixth form, and that's where I started to find out about opportunities in first year. So from then, like I was determined. I was like, okay, before you get to uni, because first year applications open pretty early for law, and for certain firms, like the deadline closes early too. So before I went into first year, like I wrote in my book, like done a lot of researching, opened my book, wrote loads of different firms, about a little bit about them and when their first year applications opened and closed. So before I went into first year, I knew exactly which events like I kind of had to go to, which firms I needed to speak to, and basically where I wanted to apply. And I think that was very key, because doing a lot of the hard work in first year meant that now like I don't have to focus too much on that side, like applying for training contracts. So when I had my first year schemes, some of them have fast tracks. So with Clifford Chance, I did Spark, and you can get a training contract at the end of the Spark scheme. So that's how I got my training contract with Clifford Chance. And with the other firm, I also did a first year scheme, and I then applied for a direct training contract with them. And from the beginning, I had my eye on two firms. And they were the two firms that I had met when I was in year 12 and year 13. So from the beginning, even though I applied to loads of other firms, I had my eye on those two.
Wow.
And I think that's very key, because a lot of the time, sometimes it can be a numbers game, like applying, is it luck if you get an internship or not? But I think for me, like my strategy was, it's okay if I don't get the others. The others can be practice for the two that I want. As long as I get the two that I want, I don't need to get 5 training contracts or 5 internships. Like I just need the ones that I want. And they're the ones that helped me get in the door in the first place and told me about commercial law. So that's kind of how it worked out.
Yeah. And so you have like a laser vision focus, in the sense that this is the industry I'm coming into, and yes, if I get these opportunities is great, but I'm looking for this too. And just a quick question, so what is a training contract? Like, what does it mean?
A training contract is a graduate role. So once you leave university, you have to do a qualification if you're becoming a solicitor. So this is what I'm doing. My process is I'm becoming a solicitor, not a barrister. So they have two different processes. So because I've done a law degree now, once I finish my degree, I have to do something called the LPC. And that's where you go and study a little bit more. So you go to, I think it's like the University of Law, and you study for 6 months, things specific to the industry, and you do exams. So it's basically like uni. After that, you start your training contract, and it is a 2-year kind of process where you go into different areas in the law firm and you try different areas, because going into the industry, going into commercial law, you don't really know what area you want to sit in, because they do such a broad they have such broad areas. They work in loads of different sectors. So you go in and you sit in different seats, so 6, let's say, departments or practices, and then at the end you pick it. So by the end of your training contracts, you would have been exposed to 6 different areas, and then you kind of choose the one that you want to sit in. Then after your training contract, then you become qualified
as a qualified lawyer.
Yeah, so you become a newly qualified solicitor, and then it goes from there.
Yeah, so what's the difference between a solicitor and a barrister? Because I think lawyer or law sort of like a hodgepodge term, but there's really different nuances and different roles in it. And you mentioned commercial law a lot. So is that where the bag is?
Yeah, it might be. Yeah. So funnily enough, I actually wanted to be a barrister before I wanted to be a solicitor. And a barrister is essentially the person, they are the advocate. So they are the ones that are going into court representing their client. So they have a very direct relationship with the client. And if matters go to a court, that's the person that you see in the wig standing up there representing somebody. That is basically a barrister. They can have, they are known to be kind of working long hours. I guess solicitors work long hours as well. But it's a bit of a different process with how you're allocated work, how the process of getting, becoming a barrister is also very different. Whereas with a solicitor, it's more office based. Yes, most of it's office based, unless you're working in like a specific area. And you're kind of you're doing a lot of negotiation, a lot of, contracts, and deals. It's pretty hard to explain the difference. But let's just say the solicitor is a person dealing with like the paperwork to make it really simple. And the barrister is a person that is going to the court. So the solicitor would instruct the barrister and say, okay, this is what you need to do, or give all the documents to the barrister, and the barrister would go to court.
You said that you're obviously going down the solicitor route. So what's the purpose behind that? Why do you believe that this is where you want to go in and provide value?
I think, honestly, the solicitor route seemed a little more straightforward. With a barrister, there's a lot more obstacles, especially if you come from working class background. There's a lot of financial assistance that you will need. I think you can get scholarships to kind of do the qualifications and things like that, but I think there are a lot more obstacles in that sense. Whereas with a solicitor, especially with commercial law, they're a lot more, I would say personally, a lot more forward thinking and more progressive. So the law firms will actively try and engage with communities that might not have these resources. So that's exactly what my firm did. And they will try and help you throughout the process. So if I didn't have a training contract, I would have had to pay for the LPC. I would have had to fund that on my own. But because I've got a training contract, the firm will pay for that. With the barrister, it's a little bit different. There's more obstacles. It might take a bit longer to make money, and I would be lying if I said that wasn't, a factor. It definitely is when you come from like where I come from, kind of thing. So I think that was a big thing that actually did attract me to that route as well. So
no, fairs. You have to be honest. Like we all want the bag to some extent, but and I know for you it's just not the money at all, because you're actually passionate about this, and you created your TikTok page and you're sharing so many different videos helping people from underprivileged backgrounds get into law. So if there was somebody listening, and even if they finish, because it's not too late to get into law, even if you finish university, you study something else, or like there are apprenticeships right now that people are literally just doing a law apprenticeship and becoming a lawyer within like 6 years. So what do you recommend? What sort of your tips?
I think everyone, a lot of people can work hard, right? You can develop, skills of critical analysis. A lot of people can do the job well, but I think being authentic is very key to progressing, whether it be through the application stage, interview stage, but in your career as well. I think it's about being able to display who you are to the people you're talking to, whether it be the interviewer or someone you're networking with, or your colleague even. It's about knowing what makes you you. I think that's very, very important. So what principles do you live by? What do you stand for? It's about being confident in these things and knowing these things. So when people meet me, I want them to know, for example, how much community means to me. I want them to know what I stand for. And I've always said that in every aspect of my career, I'm going to bring these principles, of love and community with me. So, like I've said, my community built me, and that's my story. So think about what you care about, because not only will that impact your relationships, but it's crucial, to deciding where you want to work, because a lot of different firms have different cultures and they value different things. So try and see whether your principles and your values align with that. I think that's very important. So know yourself, be confident in knowing these things so people can see you for who you are and know your story. I think that's very important. I think also what makes a valuable lawyer or an applicant is understanding the industry very well. Understand the industry and your placement within it. So what I mean by that is, as a trainee, what is your placement within the law firm? What is your purpose? Because at the end of the day, you're not just working for businesses, you're not working for clients, you are working within a business itself. When you recognize that, law firms really appreciate that, because looking at it from that perspective makes you understand the purpose of every task you're doing and every task that you're given. You know how it contributes to the firm, whether it's a cost or whether it generates revenue for the firm. You really understand the purpose of everything you're doing from the bottom as soon as you're a trainee. Starting out in the industry, even when you're applying, you should try and look at, where does the firm see itself in 5 to 10 years? What is its strategy? Where does it see itself expanding? Who are its core clients? Understanding this and trying to bring something new to them doesn't have to be right at the beginning of your career, but later on, I would like to think would be a very valuable thing. So I think it's about being authentic and understanding the industry.
Wow, that's good. And to be honest, it kind of sounds easier said than done, like be authentic, etc., etc. But really and truly, like especially in these corporate industries, how do you be authentic? Is there a point in time that you thought you weren't yourself, especially when you're interviewing for these things? Are you really Alaa from an Arab background from Slough? Like, is that what you're promoting, or are you promoting a new Alaa who's about to be an aspiring solicitor? So how do you differentiate the two?
No, I love that. I think I try to actively, like I said, think about how do I kind of represent myself in a way that shows them this is who I am. And like I just said, I knew I wanted to go in there and show them, okay, I care about community, I care about social mobility. And, the reasons why I care about these things is, your firm, they were the ones that provided this, social mobility initiative that exposed me to the industry in the first place, right? So this is like, for example, one of the reasons why I want to work for you. I appreciated their efforts. So I think I did try to actively bring myself to it, and you have to really do it in the moment and write things down when you're preparing. So maybe make a list of things that you want them to know about you, or just random things about yourself. Because like I said before, everyone can answer a question about a time when they worked, in the team. But how can you present yourself and your personality within that? It's also about listening to your interviewers, asking questions. So for example, one of my interviews, because I'm from the Middle East, I'm quite interested in that region and, the emerging markets there. So when I was doing one of my interviews, the lady that was interviewing me, the partner, she told me that she had worked in the Middle East. So instantly there, because I was actually listening to her, like not completely stressing out, I made a note of that, because that's something that I could speak to her about because I was interested in it as well. So listening to your interviewer and being genuinely interested in their journey too, I think is very important. And try and build rapport. Be yourself, be, personable, smile, never underestimate a smile. I think that's being authentic. I think there are certain instances where I do think, oh, Alaa, like, are you not being yourself? And I think it happens quite unconsciously, whether it's like the way I speak. Sometimes, like, naturally, when you're speaking to someone a little bit more senior, like, your voice might change a little bit. And I notice that happens with me a lot. Does that mean I'm not being authentic? I'm not sure. But I guess that's kind of changes that happen unconsciously.
Yeah, no, I think the same as me. I'm not going to sit here and lie.
Yeah.
My voice changes depending, and I think, to be honest, I think it's actually more so emotional intelligence of how you communicate to people. Let's be real, because my voice changes when I speak to some of my friends. My voice might change when I speak to my mum. My voice will change when I speak to, and it's not like a drastic change. It's the same, even on this podcast, because I'm so engaged and I want to ask you, really good questions so we can get a lot of value out of this conversation. My voice might change, but dependent. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think it doesn't steal away from your authenticity if you have a little hiccup in your voice. But no, you touched on, again, something really good about listening, those listening skills, and you just literally listened out and you heard that your interview was from the Middle East, and it actually relates. So I was doing my internship, right? And the difference between so I basically had like a mentor, someone senior that was working in the bank that was interning in, and this piece of advice I'll never forget. He basically told me that as soon as you start your internship, basically get something called a little black book. And it sounded a bit weird. I was like, what are you talking about? He was just like, get a little black book. And every time you have a conversation about something, like, write down minor details about someone. Like, listen, if that makes it, like, intentionally
Yeah.
listen. So I used to speak to different workers, VPs, etc. And I just hear, oh yeah, I'm going. It's my sister's birthday on the weekend. I'm just like, noted as a
Sister's
sister.
birthday or something.
It sounds a bit weird, but it's. Do you know what It's like you're intentionally listening, and then I have a conversation with them. And I'll be like, oh, how's your sister's birthday? I'll be like, oh yeah, it was good, XYZ, and okay, this is because, one, I was online as well. So this is why it worked as well. I was virtual. So it's not like I'm in person where you just naturally just have those conversations. I had to work a bit harder to actually listen in, because when you're online, you have a tendency to you might just, blank out what people are saying. You can have another tab open. Like, there's so many distractions. But yeah, that little black book, game changer, because I know things about people. I intentionally know things about people, and I bring it into conversations, subconsciously, sometimes consciously. And I think it also just is nice, right? People like to hear that hear that you're listening, or things about them. And it's even from a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it talks about how when you say somebody's name. So if I talk to you, the first thing I'm going to say, hey, Alaa, or I'll approach you, I'll say your name. Oh, that was really nice, Alaa. You'll be like, oh, like, you know my name? Yeah, so I think, yeah, listening skills. If you're listening, which you should be, if you're listening, make sure you're listening, because there's a lot of gems on this podcast. And what we do, or what I do, should I say, I release a weekly newsletter. So make sure you're subscribed at www.valuablepodcast.com, where I'll be putting in more information for you to read as well. But isn't this good? This is a great conversation. I'm enjoying it. Are you enjoying it, Alaa?
I'm enjoying it too. I feel like it's very rare that you just kind of sit and talk about your journey, because a lot of the time you really kind of forget where you started and the things that you've achieved. So I really do appreciate it, honestly, because it's I've been preparing for this for a long time. Do you know what I mean? So,
No, it's good. The fact that you actually said that, right? I heard this as well. Like, life is going so fast. You don't stop to think about where you came from. And the thing about that is, where you are now is because of where you came from.
yeah.
Like, what you were doing back then. If I take it back to what I've been doing, like, new people that engage with me, oh hey Victor, like, they don't know what, like, how I'm here. Right? We went through some trials and tribulations. So sort of like, yeah, just like reflecting. I mean, you sitting here talking about your journey, like, is there any, like, sort of pivotal moment in your life that you think that's got you here?
I don't think there was a pivotal moment, but I'll say it's just been a long journey. It's been a long journey. I think, like I said, it was personal hardship. I think that it wasn't like an overnight thing at all. So I think it was going through things, experiencing things, and wanting better. I think that was like the clear focus that I've had and I've still had. And like, I'm not there yet. Do you know what I mean? I'm not there yet at all. So I don't think there was a pivotal moment. But I will say the work that I was doing in youth parliament with my community, with the youth clubs like EXAF, the youth service, Slough Youth Service, it's amazing. The people, you feel loved, you feel like you belong in a place, you feel empowered, you feel confident, like there's something out there for you. That was also such a big part of my life. But I don't think that was a pivotal moment.
Pivotal moment.
So many things, yeah.
Yeah, so sort of just like the journey of you doing so many different things, and like I said, a few different sort of hardships. And on your sort of journey, I know with politics, people really have strong opinions. Have you had like any sort of people come up against you, any sort of threats?
I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is when I went to the House of Commons and I did a speech there. So that's when I was representing Slough at the time with the UK Parliament. And I didn't know that people were that opinionated and actually just loved to hate as much until that moment. So what happened is they record the whole sitting in the House of Commons when you're debating. They record it all, and they can post clips of it online. I think it's like you can watch it like live on BBC Parliament, like on the day, but also there's like news media platforms that kind of can take clips and put it on their platform. So what happened one time was, I think it was Channel 4. Channel 4 took a snippet of my video and posted it on their Facebook. And Facebook, right, is like just the craziest platform. Like since then, I just don't like Facebook because there's a lot of people on Facebook, and when things go like viral, if Channel 4 puts something on their platform and they post it, a lot of people are going to see it. Like I had thousands of views, right? So what came along with that? I wasn't just putting Slough on the map. I was getting a lot of call for it. There was just a lot of really nasty people. So like in my area, very, like I said, multicultural. You're very much sheltered from a lot of like nasty people that are like either racist or all these sort of things. Like, I was like, I'm white passing, right? So I instantly, even in my community, have a lot of privilege in comparison to other people. But when it was something like on a bigger scale, like my face was put out on a bigger scale, that was really like when I started to realize there are actually nasty people. There are Islamophobic people, because I'm Muslim, right? There are Islamophobic people that they started coming out for me. Not just like there was sexist comments, racist comments about my name, about like, you know, how I looked, everything. And it was coming from like old people, adults, like, you know, people with family and kids that were just commenting. It was really crazy. At the time, because I was still pretty young, I think I was like maybe like 16 or something. It was very frustrating because it made me kind of realize, like, do I actually want to be in politics? Would I want to become an MP? Would I be able to handle kind of like a media presence with a lot of people at you? And it's not just people saying like, oh, I don't like what she thinks, or I don't like, you know, what she's saying, but they're atting you. They're coming like for you as a person. I think it just kind of like made me realize that there are a lot of people that don't just agree with, you know, what you're saying, but might not just agree with you as a person and like who you are. And I thought that was very crazy for me to experience. Yeah. And that's something I always think about. And anytime I think about, okay, do I see myself in a career in politics, you know, with a media presence, would I be able to handle that? Like, I always just think of that moment.
Yeah. No, that's actually quite horrible the way people are, and like they get onto you. But I think that, like you said, like what politics, like you're up for the sharks, if that makes sense. Like look at our politicians in the UK.
Sorry, but the thing is, like, that, like we were kids, do you know what I mean? So it was really shocking. Like I wouldn't think people would want to do stuff like that. Like there were some nice comments, but there were also people that said, these kids, you know, what do they know, kind of thing. So it was pretty nasty.
Mm. But do you feel like it's giving you sort of a thick skin, like hard skin? Because I know that you'll probably need that as well in the career that you're going into.
I think definitely. I think it just showed me the reality of what things are like, and if anything, if I did want to go into politics, like this is something that I'd have to deal with. So I'm quite like glad in the sense that I've been exposed to it, and I'm not. It's not something that comes as a shock at all. I think it's just knowing how to navigate that and knowing how to respond to that. And a lot of the time, it's by maybe just not responding and moving on. Like at that moment, like what could I possibly do? I wasn't going to reply to thousands of comments saying like, I wasn't going to do that. So I just had to just close it and just move on with my day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sort of like when it comes, you mentioned it was like kind of like a shock. So like I guess with surprises, the natural element of surprises is like you don't know something is happening. So like, is there anything in your sort of journey that's really shocked you or surprised you, and you maybe didn't know how to deal with it?
I think probably the most recent example would be COVID. With COVID, obviously that was very difficult for a lot of people. Very difficult for me, particularly because my dad passed away. And at that period, at the same time, was application season. That was application season. So that was kind of like it was like the peak, like everything had been working towards. It was like, okay, now I'm starting to get interviews, for jobs. Like this is pretty big. So I think that probably was the biggest shock. I think things like rejections, that's just a part of the process. So those didn't really come as a shock to me when I was like going through this journey with commercial law, right? But I think the passing of my father whilst at uni and trying to secure grad roles was very, very difficult, because I think like literally, to be very vulnerable on this podcast, I had an interview on the day that my dad passed away. So it was very, very crazy, as you can imagine. And I think it was a very pivotal moment for me, right? In a positive sense, because it made me kind of reevaluate everything. And as you might have gathered from this podcast, like before that moment, a lot of things were very career focused, very much like achievements. Like these were very big things for me. Like I was, very ambitious. I still am ambitious, but just, maybe not as much as I was before. And I think it knocked me off a little bit because, a lot of the things that you do right now, it's a part of it is for your parents. It's for the people that you're around. And honestly, like even once getting my training contracts, it wasn't something like I felt like I could truly celebrate. Not because like I didn't have anything to celebrate, but it was more so, the people that it was for, they weren't all around me at that period. So like, I think this is to say, this is not to say, oh, like, give me some pity or whatever. Like, it's more to emphasize, like, it's not just about your success. It is really about who is there around you for you to share it with. And that is something that honestly I did not appreciate until that moment and that period of my life. So one thing I learned, just to, I guess, maybe leave it on a positive note, is there are a lot of important things in your life. Your career is important, success is important, progress is important, but those around you, like, irreplaceable, right? So trying to like maintain your purpose and just seeing how valuable I am, it has definitely been difficult. But it has reevaluated my life in a better way, appreciating things that I might not have appreciated. A lot of things in life is just based on like accolades and, what you can tell people you've done. But there's a lot more meaningful things behind that. So don't lose sight of that, even when you're trying to, chase your dreams, trace this grad role, like sit down and appreciate the more simple things. That's like the one thing I really, really want to emphasize.
That's, yeah, I'm actually lost for words now. No, yeah, it's sort of, it's hit me, if that makes sense. It's hit me because I could get this success, right? These accolades, you're doing so well. And when you actually said that, it's more so about who's there to share it with you. And especially when you're at uni, right? Because uni's like a getaway place to grind. You
Mm-hmm.
go away from your home, you're out grinding, you're posting on social media, all these amazing things you're doing. Maybe, yeah, your family's seeing it too, but it's like, who, and when push comes to shove, who is there to for
Exactly.
you to enjoy it with? And maybe that's even a sort of a prompt for me myself as well, to spend more time with my family and spend more time about the things that sort of like actually matter in life, because it's hard to strike the balance, because I'm not here saying don't chase your goals, because that's just completely contradictory to what I'm trying to do with this podcast. So, but I guess what we're learning from Alaa is that yes, we want to obtain a certain level of success. Yes, we want to provide value, because this is what I said, being valuable gets you rewarded. Does that make sense? But I guess is looking more so on different spheres of life. Like, are you in your family, in your community? We touched on community a lot. We've been touching on family, and you're just providing a different perspective. So that's powerful. And the last thing I'll just quickly end off is gratitude, being grateful. And oh man, am I grateful that you joined me on this podcast.
No, I'm
But
grateful. But honestly, there's things that I probably never like said to people that I've said on this podcast. So yeah,
yeah,
but it's
so
truth, I guess.
being grateful. But yeah, that's it. I hope you guys take that on. But in 2022, is there something that's pressing that you want to do?
I don't think there's anything pressing. I think it's more, like I said, about community. I have a little bit of a gap before I start the LPC, so I just want to pursue my passions, do things I genuinely enjoy doing, try and see if I can work on some projects with my community. Once I finish university, before I start the LPC, I think I'm also releasing something quite exciting. I'm not going to get into it at the moment.
We can't get a little teaser.
Stay tuned. Follow me on like LinkedIn, and on social media like on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah, no, perfect. I was literally just about to ask that, but I'm going to do something different in this episode. I feel like I'm going to close it off asking a question. So I'm going to ask you a question, and no, sorry. So it's like a game. So we're going to play a game right now, just to close off the podcast. I'm going to say one word, and you're going to tell me the first thing that pops into your mind.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Valuable.
Oh, Victor.
That was not the answer I was expecting. Fairs.
That's a good personal. That's a good word to be associated with you.
No, fairs. But no, I mean, the whole purpose was I was trying to just get across, what does value mean to you?
Love, honestly, love people. There's so much love in the world. You need to just absorb it. Okay, love is the most valuable thing I think in my life at this point. So give it, take it, appreciate it, don't neglect it, build it. All of these things, just love. Life is beautiful, man. Just love it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alaa. This has actually been really, really insightful, genuinely lovely conversation. I hope a lot of the listeners are taking value from this. I think you mentioned it before, but we're just going to do it again. Where can they find you, follow you, support you?
So my social media is fz.alaa. You can find me on TikTok and on Instagram. And if you want to find me on LinkedIn, it is Alaa Fawaz, ALAAFAWAZ. So keep an eye out.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Victor. This has been great. Absolutely loved it.
Wasn't that episode so great, filled with so much value? If you enjoyed it as much as I did, make sure to share it with a friend or family and follow us on social media at Valuable Podcast. And don't forget to sign up to the mailing list at www.valuablepodcast.com. Remember, increase the value you provide and you'll rise in due time.